Hey everybody, this is Jane, and I'm here to review One to Watch. This is a book about Bee, who is a plus-size fashion blogger, very active on social media, obviously, and that is her full-time job. One day, her and her friend are watching a show called Main Squeeze, which is similar to The Bachelor, if you've ever seen that. And Bee basically has the issue that there's not a lot of diversity on the show. She has a social media post about it and it goes viral. So the company contacts her and says, "Okay, we hear you. Would you like to come on and be the next big squeeze, the next or main squeeze? Big squeeze, oh dear. The next main squeeze, which would be similar to being like, would you like to be the next bachelor?" B is hesitant to do so because she is not quite over her past relationship, but she decides, what the heck, it'll be good for her career. And so she goes. And craziness ensues. So this book ended up getting a 4 out of 5 for me. I had a good time with it, but I also had an emotional roller coaster with it. So this book I was hoping would kind of just go to the light and fluffy side of things and just let us enjoy having a plus size protagonist. It didn't do that. It looked square in the face and said, we're gonna confront the issues of being a plus size woman. And while I appreciated that so much, it was a very difficult read for somebody who is a plus size woman. And I would urge you, if you are a plus size woman or plus size person, who, whatever your gender, if you're a plus size person, to have caution going into this, because there was one point where I put the book down and I just cried because it was just hitting a little too close to home. So I don't think this is a spoiler because it happens really early on, but like as soon as B gets there, there are people who are commenting about her weight and, kind of doing a, well, we thought we were here to seduce some hot chick. And it's just very difficult and very hurtful in some cases. I did like, once we got into it, past a lot of fat shaming stuff, once we've gotten some of the really awful contestants kicked out of the show, I had a much better time watching B try to get with the guys who, or try to get to know the guys who were worth getting to know in the book. But it is very triggering, I think, because so much of it is stuff that I had personally experienced as a plus size woman. And it's not just stuff like, she talks about in the early part of the book, getting a table instead of a booth because sometimes it's hard to fit into a booth. And I actually like booths better, but because of my shape, I can usually fit into them okay. Not every plus size woman's body is that way, and depending on where you hold your extra weight, that can definitely be difficult. So I was fascinated by that. And then I know there was a discussion at one point of maneuvering through a small space in a restaurant. And again, as a plus size woman, I understand that sometimes it's difficult to maneuver very small spaces. So some of it was on a practical level, and I didn't mind that. I liked that kind of representation of, the difficulties of being plus size. But I was very traumatized. I hate to say traumatized because that sounds so awful, but I definitely had a harder time with some of the things that were said to be, and some of the things that the guys said. My own dating as a plus size woman has been very difficult and traumatic. I am in a long-term relationship now, but you carry that stuff with you for a really, really long time. So I'm not going to cry, at least I'm going to try not to, but this book was very emotional for me, and I think if you are a person who thinks that could trigger you, it might, so just be warned. I did love the representation in this book, not just of B, but there are other representations in this book that I really appreciated. There is a trans character who, or at least a non-binary, I guess would be more appropriate. I'm not sure how they identify, but I would say non-binary at the very least, character who's a side character, and I really liked that representation. There is an asexual character, and I loved that representation. There is also a wide variety of ethnicities of the gentlemen on the show, and I was fascinated and interested to see how different everybody was and their different backgrounds, and it was a very diverse read. So if you're looking for a diverse read, I think this was very, very good. This book, I also really loved the family dynamics. B is a stepdaughter, and her relationship with her stepdad is just so sweet and so beautiful, and I really liked seeing that. So often, step parents in books are portrayed as, the bad guy, the evil stepmother, or the abusive stepfather. And in this case, we have B, who has a lot of family support, a wonderful family, a really great stepdad. And in our family, we're a mixed family as well. My kids have a stepmom and they have a stepdad, so it's definitely nice to see kind of the representation on the other side of that. Oh gosh, I'm sorry. It's so nice to see the representation on the side of that where it's not just step families are evil, but step families can be your biggest support. So I really liked that element of this book. There were times that this book was very cute and very funny, and just generally I had a great time reading it, although obviously it brought up a lot of emotions all around. I was very invested in her relationship with a few of the guys. There were some of the guys I was really rooting for to end up as the one that she gets at the end of the program. I won't spoil any of that for you, but I was happy about how things turned out. So now that I've talked about the ways that this book just ripped my heart out, I would like to address a couple things that I didn't love so much about the book. Besides, obviously, the emotional roller coaster, which it was good that happened, but I'm counting the emotional roller coaster part as a positive. These are some of the things I didn't love. There is a prologue in this book that I found a little weird, and I didn't really jive with it, and I thought, oh, what a weird way to start out this book. And that is kind of how B got into fashion. And I could have done without that. I also would have liked to know a little bit more about how she's supporting herself as a fashion blogger. I know that can happen, but it just surprised me because that's her full-time job. And I'm a YouTuber and I do some social media stuff and I write, but it's not a full-time job, it's a side job. So I would like to know how she is supporting herself as a fashion blogger. So, that's great and awesome, but, and that's definitely a very modern, fun job, but I was like, oh, how are you supporting yourself? And, she doesn't have kids or anything, so maybe that's how. But I was kind of a little weird about her getting into the fashion industry through the prologue and kind of unsure about exactly what that entailed in her job, probably because it's not super, super important to the book, but since she did get the job as the next Bachelorette type character because of her social media presence, I don't think it would have hurt to know a little bit more about her on social media. I liked B as a character, but I think she made some very bad decisions and she had some things that I just wasn't jiving with. Particularly, and this happens really early in the book, so I don't feel like it's a spoiler, she is not over a guy who she really needs to be over. And she causes a guy to cheat on his fiance, and I just have a real problem with that. I get why, and it's important to her character and everything else, but I just that just bothers me. I don't think as a woman I would be okay with being like, hey, you're here, I really am attracted to you. I know you've got a fiance, but let's do this anyway. Like, it was very hard for her to come back around to me as a character I could root for and like, because that is such an unlikable action to do that to another woman. So I did have some issues with Bea as a character and some of the decisions she made, not just in that instance. There were other places and decisions she made along the way where I just was kind of frustrated with her. So I didn't always love her, but I did find her relatable and the difficulties of her journey relatable. I ultimately liked the end, but it was like the after the end of the book. Like, you have your climax and this is what happens, and then you have like flash forward. Had that flash forward not been there, I'd have thrown the book and we would be having a completely different discussion here. Some stuff went down near the end and I was like, you have got to be kidding me, we are not doing this. And I thought it was going to ruin the book. Then, like, in the afterwards, we got it fixed and I was okay. But this book came really close to being one that gets thrown across the room because I thought, oh, they did not just do that. And all I'll say about that is, a while ago, I read a book called The Marriage Clock, and the way that book ended, I just felt like it kind of, the ending ruined the importance of the book. And I kind of felt like if that ending had stuck what I thought was going to be the ending, because, you know, we didn't have the little epilogue thing yet, if that had been the ending, I think it would have been kind of a similar situation where I would have felt like it ruined the book, and it ruined a lot of it, even though Bea is a very different character. In The Marriage Clock, the character is trying to find a husband for herself before her parents kind of get her in an arranged marriage. And obviously that's a different situation. But for Bea, she is in this show largely because she wants to build her popularity. She's not necessarily in the beginning looking for love and romance. And while I was okay with that, you know, she obviously wants to be loved, and I want her to be happy and have a happy ending. And again, not trying to spoil anything. I feel like we're kind of getting borderline those spoiler places, but that initial ending would have kind of followed one side of her story, and it was the side that I was not rooting for. And then the other side was more the other side of her story, which is what I wanted to happen. So I did have a good time with this. I thought it was funny and wonderful and an emotional roller coaster to read. So if you are looking for something light and fluffy and funny, this is not it. Which I think is the biggest issue I had with it too, is I wanted the light and fluffy and funny, and while I appreciated it for all it did, I really would have liked a little more of the light and fluffy and funny and a lot less, let's have a discussion about the issues of being a plus size woman. So just know what you're getting into when you get into this. Again, I felt like from everything I'd seen and heard, and I was kind of getting more of a rom-com vibe, and that's not really what this is. This is not actually at all what this is, I would say. So just know that going in so that you can be prepared for what you're getting into. I picked this up because my best friend had picked it up, and when she was telling me about it, about the book's premise, I was like, oh, that could be fun. And then she was going to read it, and I was like, oh, we can read it together, that'll be great. She started it, but didn't finish it, but she will probably go back to it, although I've kind of done some spoilery stuff to her and been like, oh, girl, you might want to wait. And she's like, oh, yeah, I might want to wait. So we'll see if she finishes it, but that is kind of how I ended up reading this right now. And like I said, I just thought it was going to be a fun, nice time with a plus-size character. Didn't turn out to be quite what I expected, but I really liked what we did with this. So that was my thoughts on one to watch. And if you can recommend any books that have plus size characters, but that are less focused on body and more focused on everything else, please let me know in the comments. I love the Janie Austen mystery series. Janie Austen, I don't know if she's plus size. She's heavier than they typically are where she lives, which is LA. It's kind of implied that she's plus size, but then it's kind of implied that she's just slightly like 20 pounds overweight, so I don't know. But, so I love that. So just characters that have the plus size representation, but are fun and maybe more rom-com-y than this would be great. Because like I said, I loved it, but oh, that was a lot of emotion. And not the romantic emotion I was hoping for. If you've read the book, please tell me what you thought of it. If there are other books that are similar as far as a character who is not necessarily perfect goes on The Bachelor, or a guy who's not perfect goes on The Bachelor, that kind of story, please leave comments below, because I definitely was interested in that. That was a fun read, and I would love to read more of it, especially with imperfect Bachelor or Bachelorette characters. My social media is below, so if you'd like to follow me anywhere other than YouTube, all of that is linked down there. Also is a link of books that I've written. So if you'd like to check me out as an author, feel free to do so. I write romance, though typically not rom-com, although I think some of my books have funny elements too. Alright guys, this has been Jane. I'll see you next time. Bye.